Well, shalom. The next installment of Pri Ha Etz, Fruit of the Tree, that we're going to be focused on from now until the end of June is Shaul's letter to the Philippians, which proves that even while Shaul or Paul sat in that foul Roman prison, he never lost his passion, he never lost his sense of mission, he never lost his sense of direction, he never lost his command of the situation. He might have been forgotten had he chosen to take a little, sabbatical from congregation planting as he sat in prison awaiting trial. But once Shaul had determined his life calling, that calling daily kept him working and daily improved his attitude. These set of studies that are releasing on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, whether you're headed off to work, are like a little devotional in nature. They're just going to be 5 to 10 minute videos and a little bit of a Bible study. Paul's attitude kept his calling going forward. And then his calling helped his attitude go forward. His attitude helped him conclude that it didn't matter what happened to him, so long as his calling continued. We're going to see next time in chapter 1 that we're going to see Paul's unchanging mandate. Shaul remained on track, even in prison. He insists that his circumstances have actually turned out for the progress of the good news of the Messiah. We're going to see over the course of our study together, over the next 45 days, Adonai's heart showing up so vividly in this letter. God is going to be seen in people who, although they find themselves in positions of adversity, many of us watching this on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, we've been through some adversity over the last 45 to 60 days. Nevertheless, we see here God will be displayed in attitudes of conquest and joy and shalom and ministry. You see, Adonai is the source of Shaul's joy, his shalom, his conquering spirit and his heart for ministry, even when he's an inmate, even when he's in need of someone to minister to him. So our study is going to encompass a letter that was written while he was in prison in Rome. Probably we're talking about the years 60 to 63 CE. Paul probably arrived in Rome in the spring of the year 60 or 61 CE, was under house arrest for 2 years, Acts 28 verse 30 tells us. And during this 2-year imprisonment, he writes the letters usually called the prison letters: Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. So he wrote this particular letter for several reasons. Number one, he wished to prevent here any criticism against a dear friend and servant of the Messiah, Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus had been sent by the Philippian Kehillah, the congregation, to deliver a gift and to encourage Shaul while he's there in prison in Rome. But Epaphroditus becomes extremely sick, almost to the point of death while he's with Paul. And so his return here to Philippi was delayed, apparently for a long time, and because of this, Shaul feared criticism of Epaphroditus by the congregation. They might think that he was a quitter or a weakling or something. So Paul writes here to ease the path for Epaphroditus and to prevent any criticism of him. I believe he wrote this letter for a second reason, and that is he wished to thank this particular congregation for their help throughout his ministry. They had sent him a gift right after he had founded the congregation and moved on. They had also sent gifts to Paul at Thessalonica and at Corinth. And now they send him not only a gift, but they send him a righteous man, Epaphroditus, to minister to his needs while he's there in prison. Third reason I believe Shaul wrote this letter to this particular Kehillah is that he wished to call them to unity and to harmony. There were 2 ladies in the congregation who were quarreling and were causing a disturbance. We find that in chapter 4. That's such a rare occurrence in congregational life, isn't it? 2 ladies who are quarreling and causing a disturbance. My tongue is firmly planted in my cheek, of course. And finally, Paul wished to deal with some false teachers who were just beginning to arise in the Philippian congregation. So we know historically that Philippi was a gateway to Europe. The city was named after Philip of Macedonia, the father of Alexander the Great. The site of Philippi was a natural fortress sitting on a range of hills that separated Europe from Asia. Philippi was a Roman colony. Rome, of course, founded colonies throughout the outer reaches of the empire to keep the peace and to guard against invasions from barbaric hordes. Veteran soldiers who were ready for retirement were usually granted citizenship if they would go out and settle these colonies. And later, however, a city was granted the distinctive title of a Roman colony for loyalty and service to the empire. And so the city of Philippi fit right into Paul's master plan. Its strategic location assured the spread of the good news throughout the Roman Empire. Paul knew that these Yeshua followers from Philippi, whose employment took them from Philippi throughout the empire, could move on out ahead of him. We find in Acts, the 16th chapter, describes the founding of this Philippian congregation on Paul's, what we call his second, quote, missionary journey. We find in Acts chapter 16, quickly turn there, and then we're going to call it a day on this introductory message. In verse 11, we find the founding of this congregation. Verse 11, Acts 16, sailing from Troas, we made a straight way to Samothrace. The next day we went to Neapolis, and from there we went on to Philippi, a Roman colony, and the leading city of that part of Macedonia. We spent a few days in this city, and then on Shabbat, we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we understood that a minyan met. Verse 16, and once we were going down to the place where the minyan gathered, we were met by a slave girl who had in her a snake spirit that enabled her to predict the future. She earned a lot of money for her owners by telling fortunes. This girl followed behind Shaul and the rest of us and kept screaming, "These men are servants of God Most High. They're telling you how to be saved." She kept this up day after day until Shaul, greatly disturbed, turned and said to the spirit, "In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, I order you to come out of her." And the spirit did come out at that very moment. But when her owners saw that what had come out was any further prospect of profit for them, they seized Shaul and Silas and dragged them to the market square to face the authorities. Verse 23. And after giving them a severe beating, they threw them in prison, charging the jailer to guard them securely. Upon receiving such an order, he threw them into the inner cell and clamped their feet securely between heavy blocks of wood. And around midnight, Shaul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, while the other prisoners listened attentively. Suddenly, there was a violent earthquake which shook the prison to its foundations. All the doors flew open, and everyone's chains came loose. The jailer awoke, and when he saw the doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, for he assumed that the prisoners had escaped. But Shaul shouted, "Don't harm yourself, we're all here." Calling for lights, the jailer ran in, began to tremble, and fell down in front of Paul and Silas. Then leading them outside, he said, "Men, what must I do to be saved?" And so Paul here, he finds this nucleus of women who had a Jewish background to which he could appeal. And from this group, two significant believers arise. Lydia, a prominent businesswoman, and an unnamed slave girl, it says here, who was possessed by a spirit of fortune-telling. And as we see later on, there was a Roman jailer here and his household who come to know the Messiah. Paul was attacked, he's imprisoned, he's forced to leave Philippi here, and consequently the congregation left had only a small beginning under Paul's personal leadership. And so the congregation meets in Lydia's home, continued to grow. The Yeshua followers came primarily from a pagan background. The strength of this congregation, though, is seen in the fact that it continued to support Shaul throughout his ministry, despite the little time he had with them before leaving. So the book of Philippians, Paul's letter to the Philippians, is known as one of the most personal of Paul's letters. It is written to a congregation dearly loved by him. And I know that Tree of Life is a congregation that loves greatly. And so as you head off to work or coming home from work, whenever you're watching this, just a small introduction. We're going to continue on in chapter 1 in our next installment. Shalom, everyone.